Episode 316. You're still alive. Jake smiled and shouted, "Slow down." "Okay, slowing down." Drake hung up, and after greeting his staff, he went out. At the same time, he called Jackson. Jackson had been miserable for several years. He blamed himself for Jake's death. Together with the matter of Mary, Jackson vented all his grief at work. The speed of the Robert Foundation's development in the recent years had far exceeded the previous years, thanks to Jackson's sleepless nights. When Jackson received Drake's call, his meeting had just begun. Seeing that it was Drake, Jackson did not take it, shutting down the phone and continuing the meeting. Drake tried a few times and finally it was impossible to get through. He drove himself in the direction of Jake's old house. When the car just arrived at the door of the old house, the couple received a phone call from Keith. Serena was driving and Jake directly answered the phone. "Sister-in-law, I just got on Facebook." "Brother," Jake said with a faint smile, "come home. I'm afraid I will be beaten." Keith heard this voice and after a moment of silence said, "You're alive?" Jake smiled and responded, "Yes." Keith laughed lightheartedly. Soon, he hung up. The car had stopped and Serena couldn't wait any longer. She opened the door and pulled him out. It was obvious that she was in a very, very good mood. With a soft look, Drake let her pull him to the door. But she was not in a hurry to pull him in. Leaving him standing at the door, Serena went in alone and shouted, "Julianne, Jeremy, Seth, Grandfather, Mom and Dad, are you home? Come out, good news." Julianne, Jeremy, and Seth were drawing in the room when they heard the voice of their mother. They all looked at their tutor. Captain Henrik was preparing to take a nap in the bedroom. At that moment, he heard Serena and walked out with a cane. He said with a smile, "Why so happy?" "Grandpa," Serena greeted him and asked, "Where are Mother and Father?" Nola also came out from the outside, saw Serena, and asked, "What happened?" "Mom!" Julianne and Jeremy ran out, and Seth followed them. The tutor also came out. Serena saw her and smiled. "You can go home for the rest of the day." The tutor was a little surprised, but soon nodded and went back to pick up her bag and got off work. Serena prepared her grandpa a little and said, "Grandpa, if Jake is back, will you be very happy?" The old man was surprised, and there was a sadness in his old eyes. He said, "Serena, he has been away for so many years, and you should face the reality. Henry's a very good guy. Why don't you see it?" "Hush." The smile on Serena's face became more and more brilliant. She looked at the old man and said, "Don't let him hear that. He'll be upset. He's sitting outside now." Julianne heard that and stared at her pair of big round eyes wide and said, "Mom, is it Daddy?" She ran outside with her short legs and shouted, "Ah!" In front of her was a tall figure. Julianne looked up. There was a blazing sun shining on the top. The man was against the light looking at her. Exquisite facial features, exactly the same as the father in the photos that Julianne had seen. The little girl's eyes widened as she shouted, "It's really Dad!" The sweet voice melted his heart. No one had taught her. The dad from her mouth made him feel a strange emotion. Unfamiliar happiness fell on him. Jake squatted down, hugging Julianne, and smiled at her little face that was so similar to Serena. However, his throat was blocked by something, making his eyelids slightly sour. Jake wanted to talk, but he did not say a word. Julianne looked at the strange and familiar man in front of her eyes, blinked, and touched the ears of Jake with her soft palm. But when she touched it, she immediately let go. Giggling, Jake touched her two small braids. His hands were slightly trembling. Jake felt that he was nervous and felt a little funny. Chuckling, Jake held the little girl and whispered, "Do you know me?" "Yes!" Julianne reached out and grabbed his arm. Her voice was sweet, and she looked at him with a smile. "You are Dad!" The people inside clearly heard the sound of Julianne, which surprised everyone except for Serena. "Jake?" Nola was surprised and quickly walked to the door incredulously. But before she got to the door, she saw a tall figure walk in with the little girl. Familiar eyebrows, familiar face. Was that Jake? "Oh my heavens!" Nola blurted out, subconsciously stepping back. In less than 2 seconds, her tears had overflowed. Trembling, she asked, "Jake?" Jake held the child nodded, and called, "Mom." Nola was so excited she couldn't speak. "Is it really you? My son?" Captain Henrik saw Jake in the back, and his eyes were equally wide as he looked at the figure incredulously. Jeremy stood behind Serena and watched the man in the photo suddenly become alive and felt shocked. Seth was wide-eyed and looked enviously at Julianne, who was held by her father. Serena saw him carrying his daughter in and laughed. She looked down at Jeremy and said, "Say, Dad." Jeremy pursed his lips and glared at Jake with familiar eyes containing an incomprehensible anger. However, Jake did not have time for that. Nola walked toward him, touching him with a pair of old hands. With his real touch, Nola choked. "You're finally back! You're still alive!" Everyone thought he was dead and thought Serena was crazy for believing that he was alive. But now, when seeing Jake standing in front of them, Nola felt so complicated that she couldn't even speak.